Hi everyone, this is Tom Wolf, your instructor, and I thought that this week I'd like to do a little video critique of all your work so that you can see what your classmates have been doing and we can talk a little bit more in depth about some of the things that are going on in your images. So first of all, we have Brendan's shot, and by the way, this is assignment 4.2, which is your depth of field and light assignment here. And in the first shot, Brendan has a large depth of field, and what I really love about this image is that we've got this very long, beautiful line from the pathway that very much draws the viewer's eye into the photograph and takes them right down to the brink of the falls. The lighting in here, as Brendan indicates in his notations, is definitely soft lighting. I do think the light here has kind of a blue cast to it, which certainly can be appealing. If we were going to work with this image a little bit in Photoshop, the one thing that I kind of love here is that beautiful sky. And I think we could probably bring that color out in the sky a little bit by just doing a curves adjustment layer, which would be something like this. And then I invert it by hitting the Command and I button on my Photoshop keyboard shortcuts. And then I'm taking a paintbrush, and if you notice in this window we've got the mask that is on that layer as being black. So I'm going to make sure I select a white brush, and then I'm just going to paint some of that color back into the sky there. And I think that helps out. And I probably would even do maybe the same thing with the ground here in the foreground. Again, making a new adjustment layer, raising those high or those darks in the curves adjustment, and then just painting them in something like this. So that was our after shot, and that's our before shot. So darkening up the sky, lightening up that foreground. But excellent depth of field image here, or large depth of field image. I think that works great for this assignment. And then of course the small depth of field image. Again, I think you've mastered the technique here. Certainly the candle in the foreground is out of focus, and the ones behind it are in focus. A couple things here about this image. It feels like to me it should be more of a a vertical image rather than a horizontal image. Something that, perhaps looks a little bit like this versus the horizontal here. I think that kind of echoes the pattern that these candles are lined up in. The other small minor detail, and again it's a real minor detail, but I think this, I don't know if it's another candle holder in the background or whatever this object is, it kind of cuts through the edge of the frame here in sort of a half in, half out kind of way. And I think I'd probably like to either exclude it entirely, so if you can move the candle, great. If not, then perhaps try reframing the image so it's not so prominent, especially because it's got this little reflection on it. I think it pulls our eye away from the main subject area, which is right here. So, from a technical perspective, good job again with small depth of field. But just some minor refinements here as we're looking at making a cleaner frame. And so our second group of images come from Matthew. In his first shot here, he uses this object in the foreground here to kind of create a frame within a frame and encircle this object that's in the distance. By using an f-stop of 4, he is able to make this go out of focus. And of course he's moved closer to it with the camera, so also that has made that out of focus. And then in the background we've got this pergola or whatever that place is in the background. So certainly a very technically sound image, works for our small depth of field, really love the composition of it and the way he uses that framing element to draw our attention to that subject in the background. So all in all, good job with this image. Your large depth of field image, I really like the whimsical aspect of it, sort of like this doorway that's in the middle of a stone fence, and there's almost a little bit of mystery to what's behind that. And I actually also find having these leaves in the foreground really balance this photograph out nicely, and that they kind of interplay with this. The one thing that I would add here is I wouldn't necessarily say this image is a large depth of field shot. These leaves aren't entirely in focus. If we go into your file info and check out the settings that you did on here, you can see this photograph was taken with an f-stop of 8. And an f-stop of 8 really is kind of sitting on the fence between a small depth of field and a large depth of field. For a large depth of field, we ideally would like to be somewhere around 11, 16, and in this instance, really, I would opt for 22. There's no reason here that you shouldn't be able to put your camera on some sort of stable surface, whether that's a tripod or putting it on a rock or the hood of your car or whatever the case is, and then shoot at even a lower shutter setting, so meaning slower. In this case, if we were to go to f22, that would be a half a second. Nothing's moving in the photograph, so there's no reason that you would want to hand hold the camera here. So in doing that, I think your depth of field would just be a little bit greater having that f-stop of 22. And the next group of images that we'll look at come from Matya. In the first image here, she's using an f-stop of 22. We've got some hard lighting that is coming from the right side of the frame. And you can see how that lighting is really emphasizing the texture, especially in this little sliver of light where it's hitting the side of the tree and in the roof of this gazebo in the background. It really gives them a sense of three-dimensionality. They almost jump off the page rather than feeling very flat and embedded into the surface of the photograph. So I think that works. You shot it at an f-stop of 22. Again, that's what's going to give us that large depth of field, and you hit it right on the money here. And overall, just a really nice image. I'd be interested to see if you went back in another couple weeks and shot this image when those trees and the foliage in the background start to turn color. I almost wonder if there's so much green in here that the gazebo starts to lose interest. And I think if it was surrounded by a lot of color, it would draw maybe a little bit more attention to it, and the image might have just a little bit more pop and excitement to it. So good job here with both your lighting and your depth of field. We'll move on to your second image, which is the shot of the statue of the buffalo. You talk about how you're using the hard light coming from the right side of the frame here, and that is absolutely true in terms of how that light coming from the side is going to give us the great texture. I mean, look at this image. You can almost feel like you can take your hand and trace along the buffalo's head and feel each one of those little bumps in the sculpture carving. So great job using hard light here. Your depth of field, you're using an f-stop of 8. Probably wouldn't be the ideal choice here. Ideally, we'd like to be down, maybe 5.6 or even an f-stop of 4. The other thing we look at here is your lens choice, and it looks like you're at a focal length of 32 millimeters, which is a little bit of a wide-angle lens, which wide-angle lenses typically tend to have the background a little bit more in focus. So what I would actually do is take a few steps back and then zoom in with your lens so it's closer to 50 millimeters or 55 millimeters rather than having it at that wide angle. That way this background is really going to go soft and your depth of field is going to be that much more exaggerated. So you'll have a shallow depth of field. The buffalo's head will sort of really be in sharp focus and that background will go really creamy. So good job here. You know, again, that's a minor point about the background, but again, great job with the depth of field and the use of light to reveal texture. And next up, we have Lauren's images. So in her first image, she's got a small depth of field, and I especially love in the background how all these flowers have really gone soft and almost the colors begin to dominate the frame rather than the shapes themselves. Very, very beautiful, creamy, soft background, which is very characteristic of our small depths of field. The one issue I kind of have in this image is the spot that is in sharp focus is so very close to the edge of the frame here that my eye tends to want to fall off the frame here rather than follow in from left to right like you described in your reflections. So perhaps the thing that's in focus here is maybe these marigolds that are right here, or something that's just a little bit more contained within the frame. As I said, this is just, I think, too close to the edge, and it forces the eye to go this direction rather than that direction. You know, it's kind of locked into this spot rather than moving through it. But depth of field, I think, technically speaking, you understand it, and really good execution of the technical aspect of the assignment. And then the second shot here, we've got the stairway, and we're especially revealing all of the texture in this wood. So all the little notches, all the little detail work, you know, even the texture in the carpet here is really revealed. Love this shot a lot. I think that your depth of field, which is large in this case, is perfect. Our eye goes from this area straight through to the back of the frame, and along the way we kind of examine all of these little intricate textural elements that really make this photograph work. So great job on this one. And our next group of images come from Tricia. In both of her images, she uses the farm as her subject matter. In her first image here, she talks about the light coming from the left-hand part of the frame, coming across through to the right, which is really emphasizing that golden color at the top of the corn stalks, which I think works really well. One of the things that, Tricia, you mentioned in your reflections was that you slightly overexposed this to get the corn stalks to look even that much softer, which I really like that approach here. That makes these almost look like sort of this one continuous carpet of color, which is very aesthetically appealing. Your f-stop was 25, which is perfect. That's going to give us a large depth of field. If I had any, you know, minor quibble here, I guess it would just be maybe I'd like to see the sky a little less washed out. We can, you know, kind of fix that a lot of different ways in Photoshop. I'll just show you one of them right there. I just did an adjustment layer. I then did Command I on my keyboard. I selected the paintbrush tool, make sure that I have white as my color in the foreground, and then I'm just going to paint that sky back in like so. And you'll notice as I do that, the sky picks up a little bit of color, and now we can see some of the texture in those clouds and in the background. So good job on that. And by the way, that technique is in your tutorials as you move through here this semester. So if you have any questions on that, certainly shoot me an email and I can link you up with that tutorial if you don't come across it. And your second image with the shallow depth of field here, really whimsical shot. Your cow almost has a personality in this image. And if we take a look at your camera data, it doesn't necessarily show what it is up there, but I will take a look at your writing, and it does say you were at an f-stop of 6.3, which I think is right where you need to be. Although, again, I'd love to maybe see this part of the photograph just be a little bit softer and a little bit more out of focus, because I think that the really fascinating thing here is all that texture and color and detail that is going on in the nose of the cow. But you know, again, very minor point. I think it's a great shot here. Really love it. So good job with this assignment. Next group of images are John's, and we start out with a rather abstract piece of lint that is on the floor of his apartment. And there's two things that I really love about what is going on in this photograph. First, the vantage point that you took in here. So you got down really low to the ground and you shot something that probably wouldn't really be noticed by the average ordinary person. So you've elevated this kind of mundane object to a piece of art. The second thing that I love is how you've used this technique of small depth of field. You know, the background and the foreground go completely out of focus, and our eye is led directly to the details of the lint in the center of the frame. So great shot, great vantage point, and a very creative approach to this assignment. Second image is your large depth of field, and beautifully composed image. We've got this nice line in the foreground here that draws our eye in through the frame. I think these are arrows here, but whatever these sort of worn out painting marks on the pavement are, again, they sort of lead our eye to the two people that are walking along the path here. All these other things, a little bit of graffiti there, speaks to sort of the urban nature of this sort of idyllic paradise that they're walking through here. So again, great depth of field, super job with the composition in your frame here, and just overall really interesting image, very well seen and very well photographed. So good job.